quick lesson. Gonna be very simple, very brief, nothing too crazy. Let's get into it. 64 squares. We have the 8 rows here, 1 through 8. And then we have the 8 files, A through H. Those go up. Yeah, that's what makes up the 64 squares. It's just a board, 16 pieces on each side, black and white. And then here we have the pieces. There's 6 of them. Those being the rook, the pawn, the knight, the bishop, and the queen, and the king. Sorry. And then the pawn can only move up 2 squares on its first turn, like this. And then after that, only 1 square. So it'll only be able to move 1 square. It can only take diagonally, so only pieces here and so here and here. And that's the pawn basically. It's worth 1 point. And then we have the rook. The rook can move as far as it wants on the board as long as it's only up, down, left, right, and it's worth 5 points. The knight can move in this direction here, this direction, and then it can do that for the right, left, and bottom. So it would be able to move up like this, and then like this, and then you get the idea. It's like L's in every direction. And then the bishop is worth 3 points. The knight was also worth 3 points, by the way. It can move diagonally in any direction, like this. Can't move forward. It's worth 3 points. The queen is basically your strongest piece, and it's worth 9 points. It can go in any direction, diagonally, backwards, anything, worth 9 points. Strongest piece on the board. Definitely don't want to lose that. And then your king can move to any square like this. Just 1 square though. And if that gets captured, you lose the game. That's a checkmate. And then here we have basic principles. I kind of already explained that. Basic principle of the game is to checkmate somebody, and that just means their king can't make a move. It can't and there's no other pieces that can possibly capture your piece that's threatening the king. So the basically yeah, the king can't move anywhere, and no other piece can defend it. That would be a checkmate. And we'll get into that in a second. We can show that in a second. And then chess notation, you can kind of see a little bit of it here on the right side here. It's like f3, a4, a3. That's just basically the squares and where they move. Like this move would be called d3. And say there's a pawn this here. If this takes, then that would be called, if this takes, that'd be called e takes d4, because the pawn on the e file took the other pawn that was on the d4 square. That's basically just chess notation. It's probably not too useful to most people, but it is a part of the game. And then this is what these 2 slides here, how to have a chess brain and analyzing the board, kind of go hand in hand. And this is probably one of the more important parts, especially when you're a beginner. So let me just show a little bit of how you would do that. Switch over here. Let me hide the slides. Okay, so here we have a little puzzle, and basically when you're analyzing the board using your chess brain, you want to look for captures, like what can you capture, where can you check them. Just like here, you see you can have a check here. That would be a check here. Okay, that's just you looking for checks, and he takes a capture. We've already went over. It'd be like when you take another piece of theirs, that would be a capture. You want to look for captures, takes, just anything like that. And then you also want to look out for tactics. We'll get into that in a second. And then yeah, this is basically, this is a puzzle. We can explain tactics in a second. But yeah, that's basically analyzing the board. And then tactics, this is what I was talking about in a second, right here. And a tactic would be something like, say we have this, I believe the right move here would be this. That's because in a way you can kind of see a tactic here. It would be called a fork, because these 2 pieces are being threatened, and the king can't take the queen, and this also can't take it because it can't move diagonally. That would be called a fork. That's a kind of tactic. Very simply, tactics are just kind of moves that would get you into an advantageous position. That's a fork. And then here, this actually what we just showed is a checkmate, because the king can't take this queen, and it also can't move anywhere here because the queen guards these two squares, the h2 square and the g1 square. And then this pawn, and it also can't take the queen because this pawn guards the queen. And that's what a checkmate is, essentially. Yeah, that's chess tactics. Let's move on to the last part of this, which is going to be the scholar's mate. This is probably just a little fun part that rarely happens, but if you're new, it could happen to you, which is called the scholar's mate. It's a 4-move checkmate, essentially. Let me just quickly guide you through how that would happen. So you would start off with the move here to e4 with your pawn as white. That's your king's pawn. You move it up to e4, and then they would make the move here to match you on e5, and then you would move to, or sorry, no, you wouldn't. Oh yeah. And then you would make the move to f4 here with your bishop, and then they would have to make this move here to c6 with their knight, and then on your third move you'd want to go to h5, and then their final blunder would be here to f6 with the knight, and then you take this pawn, and that's checkmate, because the king can't move anywhere, no moves, nothing can take your queen because it's guarded by this, and that's just a 4-move checkmate. That's called the scholar's mate. And that's about all I had to cover. It's a very brief kind of intro, but I hope you learned at least a little bit of how you would play the game, or maybe even if you didn't learn that, you learned a little bit of how the pieces move around. Maybe it interested you a little bit, and yeah.